One of the built-in challenges in growing up in small-town Nebraska is you don't have a whole variety of people out there in that little town. That's pretty rare. We all kind of look alike and talk alike and are related to each other. And so it wasn't till I went off to school that there were people who had different colors and different languages and looked a lot different than me. I remember as a young priest being on my first, what we called Cursillo, then CEC, in the early 80s, and there was this big guy, long hair, big beard, tattoos, on the weekend, and I thought, well, stay away from that guy, because he looked like some kind of biker dude who would mess with you. And then the very first gathering, when it came time for the sign of peace, he gave me a great big hug. Love you, man. And I thought, well, okay, maybe he's not who I think he is. So it's just been a long process throughout my life of saying, okay, don't judge anybody by how they look or how they talk. You know, we all say that line, don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah, so we all know that, but we kind of do it all the time. We're judging books by their covers and say, I think I'll get away from that person. They don't look right. And walk around them far away. So Jesus is giving us today a couple of examples of how he sees. You know, last week we had that great commandment to love your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. So what does that look like to see somebody who follows that command? So Jesus gives us his little interpretation tonight, because it's probably not what the disciples were thinking. Of like, what? No, Jesus, the scribe would be the holy guy. Scribes hadn't been around all that long in Jewish history at Jesus' day. They're kind of a result of the Babylonian captivity. And so when the Jewish community went off into exile in Babylon, one of the problems that they had being there was they stopped speaking Hebrew and they started speaking Aramaic, which is what Jesus spoke, Aramaic, the language of the folks. So when they came back from Babylon, the local people couldn't read the law. If you read Ezra and Nehemiah, you hear about them uncovering the books of the law and reading them to the people, and then the people crying because they're like, I didn't even know that was the law. So they felt bad about it. So the scribes emerge as people who would translate from the Hebrew what the law was. They became experts in the law. So a lot of times in the New Testament, Jesus calls them lawyers instead of scribes, because they came to be known as lawyers because they studied the law. So that's what they were good at. They prayed a lot, they studied a lot. Some of the scribes, and what most people might think when you hear of a scribe, did actually write the scrolls, because they had to do it handwritten scrolls. So some of them were doing that. But they picked up an idea from the priests, because the priests, when they were serving in the temple, wore these robes that matched that big curtain. Remember on Good Friday when Jesus dies, the curtain in the temple is torn in two because it opens up the Holy of Holies. So it's a real fancy curtain. And what the priests did was they wore garments when they were working in the temple that matched that curtain, because they were kind of part of the holiness of that. So they matched. And the scribes thought, we should wear something sweet too. because we're scribes and we are lawyers. So they started wearing these linen robes with big tassels on them. And they would spend a lot of time studying the books and praying publicly. And so everybody thought, oh, they're holy. And everybody, that's a scribe. And so, when they'd come to your reception or your party, you had to put the scribe at a special place. Otherwise, that wouldn't be good because he's the holy guy. So that kind of emerges. And the disciples would probably be thinking, that's holy. And Jesus says, not holy. And I'm sure the disciples, no. That's holy, Jesus. That's holy. Because a scribe could not be paid. They were not paid. They just had people donate to them. So how much they actually ended up with might have been more than pay. But they expected, that you don't have to give me a donation, but if you want the law read correctly to you, then you better give me something. So Jesus really dislikes holiness, following the command to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Jesus dislikes it when it's just for show, when it's just on the outside. As Jesus sees, that's not holy. To simply do religion or God for show. Really tease him off. Now, Mark, his version, he doesn't get into the whole litany of attack, but if you go to Matthew's, the same scene, Matthew's gospel has it all. You brood of vipers, you snakes, you ruin it. Your interpretation of the law just screws up everybody's life, and you're not getting into heaven yourself. He's teed off with these people. Because that's not holy. That's not how Jesus sees holiness. Instead, he invites the disciples over. Come. And watches people make donations at the temple. And then he points out somebody who nobody would even see. Certainly they couldn't hear, because everybody's contributions were in coins, and they had these big kind of horn of plenties there to dump the coins into. They made a lot of noise, sounded like Vegas, and all the money comes out of the slot machine. That's what it sounded like in the temple. The wealthy people were dumping in buckets full of coins. And she comes in and puts in 2 teeny tiny coins. Wouldn't even have made any noise. Nobody would notice her. She's a widow. She doesn't work. She too survives on other people's generosity. Because the law said, the law that the scribes were interpreting, was that the orphan and the widow had to be taken care of. The fact that she was so poor says something's wrong there. Because widows should not be poor in Israel. But she was. She gave all she had. 2 tiny little coins. And Jesus says, there, holy. That's holy. All her strength, all her mind, all her heart, all her soul. She gave it all. Somebody no one else would even notice. Her. See her. See holiness. He's really preparing them for what's going to happen. This scene takes place just days before he's arrested. He didn't make the scribes too happy, of course, So they made sure he got arrested. She's an example of him, who is the example of holiness. He is going to give it all his strength, all his mind, all his heart, all his soul. He's going to give it for us. So what does holiness look like? Well, it will vary with each of us. We can't see it on the outside. But if you love like he wants us to love, that's holy.